Aik Siang is Porter's friend. So yeah, Porter mentioned you guys haven't like
We haven't met
seen
in a super long time.
in a long time, so I'm super
Yeah.
grateful. Thanks, Porter, for connecting us with Aik Siang. Aik Siang is an engineering manager at Grab, engineering manager 2. So there's some, I guess there's some kind of hierarchy within engineering managers. Before engineering manager, Aik Siang was a senior software engineer at Grab, and I guess his whole career so far has been at Grab. So he's really gone up the ladder a lot. And before Grab, Aik Siang was studying computer engineering at NUS. Am I correct, right? Aik Siang?
Yeah, that's right.
And so super excited to welcome Aik Siang today to learn about his journey and to learn about the culture at Grab and the project that Aik Siang has been working on. Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now you take away, Aik Siang. Yeah.
Hey everyone. Yeah, nice to see all of you. Glad taking this leap of faith to jump into tech, and I mean the whole trend of everything is kind of moving towards that. And I think it's an exciting space to be in. A lot of young people as well. I see. It's very good to see. I think especially when the pandemic and everything is Zoom, it kind of works both ways lah. One is that remote working is also helping us work better. But you miss out some of that human to human interaction, and I think that's also important here. But anyway, back to the main topic. Being a Grab, which is this is my first job. But I was very lucky, I must say, because back then didn't know that this company would have grown this big, this fast, right? And I think kind of a unique situation here that it kind of grew from a startup to, even though you might want to call it a startup, it's not anymore lah. It's quite a pretty big company with a lot of veterans coming in from different backgrounds, from mature companies like the FANG that you know, and people coming in from startups as well. So we got a mix of people, and I think that's where the culture is formed lah. So I think, yeah, maybe we can talk more about that in the FAQ. So I think what I want to share is a bit more of the journey. And project wise, I want to first, I think, clarify a bit here, right? As a product company, as an engineer in a product company, we kind of see through a product end to end, right? What I mean by that is like we don't just jump into a product feature, build something, and then we go off. It's more like, okay, we own the entire piece of engineering for that product. So maybe I can share more on with an example, then you can kind of see like what I'm trying to say here. So before,
so just taking a step back, the idea is that you're going to introduce kind of the project that you worked on, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So projects I've worked on, early on, I spent about half a year in building kind of a configuration portal to handle feature flags. So when you want to roll out something to a mass of users, right? You want to have a toggle switch, some sort of a control panel to make sure that if we roll out something bad, then there's an easy way to turn it off so that things still go on. So that was kind of the first project I was on. The second one, for 2 years, we were working on digitalizing the entire driver sign-up process. So our driver partners previously were having to walk in to the driver centers and upload, give in their applications in paper, right? Which was number one, it's really painful to house like stacks and stacks of documents in physical space. So they wanted to change that to streamline it into digital format. So I think that one I'll talk a lot more. And for the past 3 years been working on building Grab for Business, which is essentially opening up Grab as the official provider for a particular company. So enabling, let's say if you work at Rocket Academy and you need to take a business ride. So instead of going through that whole claims process, we enable you to go into a portal, upload your employees in, add in your company credit card and so on, and kind of have a statement of okay, what rides have been taken by employees for the past month or so, and you can set some policies, some rules to say they can only take it from your office or or at a certain time or location, how much they can spend. So that is Grab for Business, which I'm still in. So
Grab
I
for
guess
Business,
the one I would want to share is for driver sign up. The whole driver onboarding process. I think that one is interesting in its own right, where it is a bit more startup phase of the company, and it's a lot of growth, and at least from the engineering side, that's kind of what molded me into where I am today. So as I think to just jump into like the high level touch points on that project, it was to build a form that essentially is able to capture drivers' documents and then pass it through something like a approval process. And there will be some offline training and so on that they still need to go down and get physical training in person, and then the ops team would kind of approve and create the driver. So that was the end goal.
What team? So, the ops team. Oh
yeah,
the ops
operations
team would go. Okay.
So the interesting part about that, right? It was how we managed to. It was both product and engineering, right? At the start, it was like trying to fit it all into Singapore and ensure that those forms are tailored to, okay, you have a provisional driving license, you have an IC, you have some other ACRA for your company and so on. But I think when we moved to different countries, what we built, we realized was not flexible enough. And I guess that's where we learned the most by making mistakes.
There's no IC, right, in another country, or they might be using something different.
So I mean, national card identification, that is quite common across the board, but there are a lot of different, there are two parts that are different. Number of documents were different. So like the emails that we needed to send out needed to be country specific. And the difference between country and language, that's where okay, how do we get the language preference of the user versus where the country person is in. I mean, we can assume that Singapore is English, but there are also Mandarin speaking drivers as well. So that whole translation topic is quite messy. And talking about emails, how do we batch them up or send a reminder? So adding in cron jobs to be able to schedule, like, okay, you have not submitted this and this. Do you want to do that? So we know, there are some times when we step back and think, hey, you know what? There are off-the-shelf solutions out there. Do we want to use it? And I think as an engineer, like, your job is not only to write code. It's more than that, right? It's like also thinking about the problem and problem solving. Like when I look back at the project, like, hey, some parts actually we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And that there could be some parts that you need to specify to your specific company's needs. But sometimes the time to market it might beat that as compared to building it on your own. So some of
did you guys end up building it yourself? Like, what off the shelf stuff did you guys end up using for this one?
So that when the form itself had to be specific, right? Because we had some privacy concerns as to how we store the documents. So we use a cloud solution from AWS to store it in S3, and also to ensure that there's some security around that, right? The pre-signing and all. But when it got to the approval side of things, that's where things got a bit hectic, right? There were ops people, and when the volume increased, there was a problem with allocating the right people to the right registrations. In a sense, like let's say there are 10 registrations, it's hard to say that, okay, you are assigned to this person, review this person. That it becomes a pigeonhole problem, if I want to put it right. So
what's a pigeonhole problem?
Oh wow! Now you're testing me.
I know. I'm not even sure. Yeah.
I think if I got the definition right, I better go Google it right now.
Oh, okay. Like, no, it's not important. It's not important. I think we get it.
Yeah, making sure that each registration has at most one, or a reviewer essentially. So matching the right reviews to the right application. So that became a problem of, do we need to build in locks? And we would run into asynchronous problems, race conditions, locking, unlocking, and then status. We need to show live status on the review page. So we're thinking about all that, and then like, hey, you know what? Take a step back. It shouldn't need to be such a difficult problem. And ended up what we did was just to say, hey, product team, let's just use Google Sheets. That's enough, right? The ops team just has Google Sheets and say, hey, you know what? It's live. You can just put your name there as a reviewer. You just put your name on this list of applications that need to be reviewed, and say, yeah, I'm looking at it. And that was good enough, right? At the point in time. We didn't have to build all that lock and key mechanism that is, pretty much in our terms, over engineering. Yeah. So and then the whole product moved on and I get handed to a team, and then that's where they took it and they broke it apart into multiple parts, into microservices, right? And that's a story for the next team to have, right? But at least from what I was there, key takeaway at least is it's hard to always define product requirements at the start. We always expect that, product requirements come in, it's always A to Z. But, that's never the case. I mean, at most half of it is correct. But then we need to adapt to the changes. And I guess how we think about our solutions is, that's one.
So did you guys end up building any software, or was it just Google Sheets all the way? Oh, you did? Okay.
No. So the whole intake of images into our system, that was built by us, but the scheduling problem was through Google Sheets.
I see. So you basically, the form, it was custom, and then it would save to some database, but it would also copy the data into a Google Sheet, which then the ops staff could then use to say who's working on which application.
Essentially that's a good summary.
Very cool.
And they don't have to always code everything. Right. That's the main thing I wanted to say here.
Cool. And when was that launched?
I can't remember. It's 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years. It must have been, right? Yeah. I doubt they're using Google Sheets now for the ops.
No.
Like millions of downloads. It's like
no,
a day
not,
or something.
That probably exceeded its lifespan, but at that point in time, it was good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Pretty sure, Rocket Academy is still using Google Sheets for a lot of stuff.
We still do, yeah.
Means
okay. Means we're on the right track. We're doing something right. Yeah, we're the next Grab. That's the story. Yeah. Okay, I think we can open it up to Q&A. Aik Siang, I don't know if you saw, I shared a Pigeonhole link. So this is a different, not the Pigeonhole problem, but Pigeonhole the software.
I see it.
And so students should have been posting some questions. If they haven't, I will buy time by asking my own question. Oh, student posed question. Great.
There's quite a few,
Yes. Okay. So students, if you haven't already, please ask questions there and upvote the questions that you see so that we can prioritize what we want to ask to Aik Siang.
Mm.
Awesome. Okay, so let me just moderate a little bit and we'll do this. Okay, top voted question so far. What is Grab's interview process like? Oh, of course it's this question. It's always this question. What is Grab's interview process like, and what does Grab look for in entry-level software engineers?
Okay, so I would think it's a lot similar to other companies as well. But at least for Grab, we have 3 rounds of interview. There is round 1, depends on which role you're looking at, right? If it's like full stack engineer, then round 1 is general backend, which goes around your algorithms and how you think about the problem and problem solving. Then round 2 would be like front end and a bit of system design, depend on what. Okay, so entry level there won't be system design. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So what is front end entail? It's like what is HTML or something?
So for our full stack, right? It's generally referring to the web. Full stack means you do your backend having an API server, as well as the front end, which is your React, essentially. Yeah. So that whole thing is what we call full stack. And I guess yes, algorithms still persist across both domains, but there is
which are the 2 domains?
Different focus. Front end and back end.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
so
how you render lists.
Algorithm is the first test, and then kind of app building is the second test, right? That's what you're saying.
Not app building. The second test in round 2 would be more of front end. Like how do you build an accordion in the web, something like that, right? So you're manipulating CSS and so on, showing data from maybe a data source, be it an API call, or maybe for that we'll just do a hard-coded value. Yeah. So I guess
there's no option to import an npm library.
We're not looking to build full apps within a period of 1 hour.
Right.
It's more of like, I guess, your understanding of the technology behind it.
Right.
So if you're asking like what you're looking for, I would say, if you say that for example, Golang, then you should be knowing, okay, what is it about? Why Golang? What are the properties of this language, right? It's like statically typed. You need to build it. The main
is it important for everyone, all candidates, to know Go?
No, because we understand that Go in itself is quite new, right? But we do expect people from other domains as well, right? Like other languages like Java, C++. There's also Python as well, Ruby and Rails. But I think from Python and Ruby on Rails, it's a dynamic language, right? It's a bit
like
less relevant to Go. So I think the relevancy does matter a bit, but I guess it boils down to how well you know Go, right? And
how would you recommend? So our students, we primarily use JavaScript and Python in our courses. How would you recommend students learn more about statically typed languages similar to Go?
So I guess, yeah, I mean, there are a ton of resources out there, right? If you are looking specifically to a company, right, that has Go, then of course go read up on Go tour. That I think 20 or 30 online, setup. It should take you through the bare minimum of what how to write in Go. It's actually telling you about, okay, what are strings, what are slices, what are arrays are, and how to do channels, how to do Go routines, things like that. Yeah. So that kind of gives you the know-how.
So online there's this Go tour tutorial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go has that official one. So Go tour or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, so that is more, I would think that is a learnable thing, right? It's not so much we're not looking so much into whether you know how to write exactly the syntax. It's more of the programming thought process behind it. How do you identify a problem? How do you identify the right algorithm to solve the problem? And how you approach it essentially. Like if you see a problem, let's say just a simple anagram solver, right? Making sure, you know, what data structures do you use? How do you clarify the question? How do you say, oh, you know, we're gonna do some input checks, and maybe I think the key takeaway for this is it's not so much focused on the code itself. Like if you say that, okay, you know what, I thinking of solving it in the brute force first, and then optimizing it later. That's also fine, right? You might not think of the most optimal O log n, whatever, right? But at least you know that, hey, you know, you understand the problem, you know there is a trade-off, right? But it's okay, you know, at least there is a solution, because that's more reflective of the real world. You're not gonna have always like entire year to make one API work very well. It's always, there's always going to be trade-off, and say, okay, within this 1 hour or 15 minutes that you have, the best I can do is this all n squared, which may be fine, right?
Oh,
Just need to acknowledge
Shannon, do you think you can mute your thing? Sorry about that. Yeah. Oh, oh Shannon? Uh-oh.
Hi, I think you can mute as a host.
Oh, I can mute him? Oh, I can mute him. Haha.
There we go.
Power. Okay, awesome. Thanks for answering that question. Does anyone have any follow-ups about Grab's interview process?
So I think we are missing one more. We went general backend and then front end, and there's a third one.
Oh, that's just a manager round. So talking about like culture fit, what kind of team you've been working with, why do you want to join Grab? Have you worked with product managers? How was it?
Okay.
All those kinds of questions. Yeah.
Okay, let's segue into a new one. Sam's question: how has Grab engineering changed you? How has Grab engineering changed since you joined? But also, how's it changed you?
Oh, this is a massive change. I'll try to time box it as much as I can. So at the start, it was pretty much a flat organization, right? There was CTO, and then there's a whole team, backend engineers, and then there's app engineers. And now there's like massive tech families, we call it. So a tech family, it consists of various functions. We have product, design, analytics, engineering. So it's designed such that each tech family can move independently, execute independently fast. So examples are like, okay, food is one tech family, right? Transport is one tech family. Geo is another tech family. So those kind of is how we organize our
what's Geo?
Engineers. Geo, so everything related to maps, routing, and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So although the engineering org is still under the CTO, right? Like each the function we put to their own functional leads. So there is a design lead, there is a product lead, across the whole of Grab. But like under them, each probably teams would have their own, I would say, domain. So for myself, like I'm under Grab for Business team.
Grab for Business.
We are so we are under the mobility team, tech family. So that covers both transport in the B2B segment and the B2C segment. Right, and then that's how it's. But I guess org apart, right? that kind of helps us, be independent within our own functions. Really, meaning to say each function is representing their own domains. Like engineering can speak up as engineering, and they are not subject to say that, oh, I report to a product team lead, so product decision always comes first. It's not the case. So it's all equally spaced out.
Sorry,
that's the upside of things. Yeah,
I just need to answer the.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just need to answer the door real quick, but please keep going, and I'll be right back in 1 minute. But yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Yeah,
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So back to the technical side of things. I think that's what you're more interested in, right? In short, there has been a lot more tools that were built in terms of deployment, right? Now it's a one-click. It does request for a slot, pulls in the latest changes, git diff from what was last in production to what you are going to deploy to production. It deploys to one instance first, which we call canary deploy. So you deploy one of like maybe 10 of the instances in your fleet. You monitor the graphs. If there's any alerts, it will roll back automatically. And if not, continue 1 hour later to say, okay, we slowly deploy to 2 instances, one by one. So all those.
And this is regardless of family. This is like general tech hygiene.
Yeah.
Not,
so that's
not family
specific,
not specific to Grab for business. Right.
Yeah, it's not. So there's a common team that handles that. So that the level of tooling now that we have is way far ahead than what we had in the past. Last time you had to do all of this manually yourself. So like you had probably a release engineer that goes there. Okay, I need a request for a slot. I need to deploy to one machine, go inside and push code to it, use Ansible and click on that, push it, the code up there. But all this are, streamlined right now. Even like we have our own, like for coding, instead of always needing to mangle with all of your, request layer, handling the different inputs, doing sanity checks on whether it's a string and so on. All those, there is already a Grab kit to a layer that is common across Grab. So you just need to define the configurations and generate then the code there. And that allows us to only focus on the pure logic part of things. So how has engineering changed so far? Previously, we had to deal with a lot of manual processes, which I think was also good in that sense, right? Because you get to hands-on and understand everything end-to-end into the details, right? But now if you join in as a fresh, you'll be like, okay, you just click on this, you click on this, you generate the code, you just write the logic. You don't know what happens in between. So that's, I guess, yes, you get more specialization, but and more productivity. But as an engineer, if you want to learn, right, you might not get as much lah. Like who would go and read deep down into all the code and see like, okay, this is what's happening at this layer of the stack. You just
it's like going to read the React. It's like going to read the React source code to understand how React does it.
Exactly.
Right? You may not go and do that.
Yeah, all those are there already. But I guess, it helps you to be faster in what you need to do. But in terms of learning, you might lack a little bit on that front. Yeah.
Sam, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What drove your decision to become an engineering manager instead of continuing as an individual contributor?
Okay. So for Grab, we do have the option to go both paths. At that point in time, I guess it was, I was in a bit more of exploratory state during my senior engineer time, right? I thought, I wanted to give it a try. And at that point in time, I was kind of already leading a project. So in that sense, I enjoyed, making the, doing those managerial stuff in a sense, making sure that the team is unblocked, making sure the project moves forward, and the big picture part of things.
Right.
Not to say as an individual contributor you don't see it. You do. I mean, in terms of more like architecture or like interactions between systems, between teams.
Right.
But for the manager side, I guess there's a lot more interactions in terms of shaping the product and upfront solutioning. There is still, some part of, I guess the lure, or should I say, what got me still interested. It's about the problem solving aspect, right? As an individual contributor, the tendency is only after the prioritization has been set, the specs have been laid out, then it comes to you. So I enjoyed the being more in the forefront of it, right? Shaping the solution, telling them to build Google Sheets, use Google Sheets instead. So those kind of more
how does
appeal to me. Yeah.
How do engineering managers interface with product managers and tech leads? Because it sounds like what you described sounds like you're playing a big part of what I would imagine a product manager's role could be as well. And so what is the distinction between these different roles at Grab?
I understand. So I guess we can start from the individual contributor side of things, right? As let's say a senior or lead engineer, you'll be very focused on the engineering aspects of things. A lot more of making sure, tech debt, or should I say, that the performance of the system is up and running. Operationally, the latency is fine, the errors are low, and that we are operationally excellent. Architecture-wise, we're building the right pieces in the right places, doing the right way of separation of concerns and things like that. So those would be, I guess, from my point of view, that is what individual contributor does.
Yeah.
A product manager kind of interfaces between the business team and the engineering team. And of course, the other factors as well, right? The analytics design. So they take in the inputs from business, what they need. But I guess that's where, they also interface with the engineering manager to kind of get what is the options that there are, right? And then, get some analytics to know that, okay, what is the impact of this feature or this product that we're building. So and then they of course get the final say somewhat of like what are the prioritization. Of course, with all the inputs from the different teams, right? And what kind of scope that we want to build the feature. Where engineering manager sits is in between. It's I guess like you said, what I described. It was at the point in time we didn't have sufficient resources on the product front. So there was one product manager. So I had to step in a little bit to become that glue across teams, right? To make sure that things are still working fine. So it's a lot dynamic. Sometimes I don't do only engineering work, right? I also say like, because of the historical context that I have on the product, I kind of can advise that, hey, these are the kind of issues that we've been hearing from our customers before. Because as engineering, we also do, the support, a little bit of the support work, right? Like, they are facing this bug, or they're trying to do this, but they can't. Then we do the debugging, and then you're like, we've heard this kind of problems. We feed it back to the product team, and I guess that's where that involvement happens. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question. You've been at Grab for a long time. What is it about Grab? What is it about Grab or your role that keeps you excited?
Keeps me excited. It's really like the entire company has shifted, has grown so fast, right? It feels like I've been a different company every time I change teams. Like just the era changed, and it's like a different team altogether. Dynamics are different, but the problems are never ending. I would want to say that,
Mm.
right? Like I think for engineering, the main thing like we would like to see is problems at scale, right? High QPS coming in, lots of requests. So that keeps increasing, and I guess it challenges the engineering team to make sure that our systems are designed in a way to keep up with that massive growth in terms of it, and certainly some parts would not automatically scale all the time. Like we sometimes build something
QPS is
that
queries per second, right?
queries
per second. QPS, yeah.
So like in the past, if you build something as a monolith, we had one system in Ruby on Rails, right? And yeah, there's only that much you can scale. You can throw in like 10 instances, make the instances bigger, but at a point of time, it just couldn't keep up with the amount of traffic that we were getting. So we had to split it out and move into a Go service, which reduced the overall cost altogether. Right, with lesser Go services, it was more efficient, and therefore lesser instances needed to serve the same amount or even more traffic.
Right.
So that that growth, right, is something that keeps us on our toes almost all the time, and it also presents us a lot of different challenges along the way. So, and I guess that keeps me excited. There's just so many problems to solve.
Awesome.
I'm just a bit
What
curious.
tech?
When you joined in Grab, how big was your engineering team as compared to what you're doing?
When I joined, it was about just one floor of people in office building. Like, so that's like 30 odd. Yeah, that was just the Malaysia team, right?
Like, oh, I thought like the whole Grab was 30 people. I was like, damn, you must be rich.
No.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
I think even earlier, right? I joined when it was in the hundreds. So engineering team was about 30 odd. They were expanding, so they were expanding to Singapore. That's where that's where I joined. So when I joined at the start, I had to go down to Malaysia because that was their main office, engineering office, for a while before they moved over to Singapore. Yeah. And now I don't know how many there are. It's I lost count.
Now there are so many offices, right? There's like I know there's a Vietnam office as well.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Engineering office.
Malaysia, Vietnam, China, US, Indonesia. There's even a Romania one recently. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Next question. What tech stack does your team / Grab use? I know you mentioned Go. What
So
generally what are
the number one supported one is Go as a backend service, right? And on the web, it's just React, right? But I think there were other legacy systems. So we used to have Grab used to run on a monolith Ruby on Rails service. So we had a period of time, early 3 years of that we still were supporting Ruby on Rails. But
3 years ago.
That 3 to around there. That was still supported. In a sense, support as in it was the language used for all web related technologies, right? Because you could easily just create a controller magically. The CRUD is there for Ruby on Rails. But if you want to write that in Go, you need to you know what, I need to do this, do a search through the SQL and get this from the database. There's just a lot more lines just to write that same thing. But yeah, as of now, because they want to focus on building the tooling for Go, and that was the main backend language. So a lot of the tooling was built around Go, and now they're trying to look at having more support for Ruby on Rails and other languages. Like there's still some legacy systems that still need it, right? So thinking about, setting up Kubernetes to kind of containerize it, and in that sense, it becomes agnostic to whatever language you're writing. As long as you have a container, we'll put it into an instance, it will run. Yeah. And the deployment pipelines, I think the whole topic on language is a lot about the tooling, right? And of course, there's also the people, whether we get the right people with the right skill set. Yeah. And also interchangeability of, moving a developer or engineer from one project to another.
Right.
If we need them to learn, Ruby on Rails, it becomes a major problem as well.
Right.
Yeah.
What did that answer your question?
Go Ruby on Rails. There are Python as well. So yeah, but mainly Go lah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I have a question. What are the differences? So I know that we have tech teams in different countries, right? And I know that the salaries are different across different countries, right? So generally, engineers in developing countries, generally the salary levels are lower than engineers in more developed countries like Singapore, or even especially the US. And so what are the main differences between the engineers across these different countries and teams? Are there different levels of it? Is it like, in countries where the salaries are lower, does that mean, this is a sensitive question, I know, so we can be sensitive, but does it mean that the engineering standard is lower in those places, or how does Grab think about the different, what is the difference between the engineers in different countries? Yeah. Like, would you say Singaporean engineers are going to be stronger than engineers in more developing countries?
So
what is the main difference?
What I can say is that across Grab there are the standard Grab levels, right? So a juniors engineer would be a Grab 3 level, and a senior would be a Grab 4, right? And the manager, there are 2 tracks. So the manager one would be a Grab 4 level. So that's standard across the regions, right? And I guess the salary is also pegged according to the cost of living. And
got it. So what you're saying is that the standards are the same actually across the whole organization internationally, but the salaries will depend on the local compensation market rate stuff, basically.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty much all I can share. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Next question. What is the QA DevOps process like for shipping new features at Grab? What are some considerations that engineers have to make before production?
Okay. It differs team to team, right? The QA team, there's still a QA team across the board, right? And there are QAs in each team. So but I think the move is towards QA team deals with more of the high level end-to-end scenarios. So they won't be testing your API, right? So as an engineer, you have the responsibility to test your own APIs to make sure you're getting the right responses. You have the right number of tests.
And so what does that testing process look like for you or for the engineers you work with?
Okay, so I guess just a simple API feature, right? A feature. So like a feature has multiple APIs, and as an engineer, if you build an API, the first thing, you write the code, then you write the unit test, make sure that the minimum coverage is met, right? Then make sure that at the unit level that's fine. Then it goes into code review, right, where peers review each other's code. Then that's where in the QA stage, actually for that stage, at least for our team, my team that I'm in, the QA for APIs are done by engineers. So we do rotation across within the team. Only when the APIs are all up in staging and the feature is somewhat, one story is complete, then the QA team comes in to check on the story according to the product specs, right? The story, right? As a user, when I do this, that is this. So while we are developing, the QA team comes up with the test plan to make sure they've covered all bases. Like, oh, what could the user do? What
But the
kind of
QA team
error
is
messages?
rotational. It's not like there are full-time QA people. It's like, hey, we all
No,
take turns to do
there
the
are
QA.
there are QA engineers specific. What I'm saying that the engineering team that develops the API takes turn to test each other's APIs.
Yeah. Got it.
So then that's where so QA does end-to-end, developers does the unit and functional within the APIs testing. And then to the topic of DevOps, across Grab there is only one central team that builds the tools, but each service teams owns their own infrastructure. Right. I know this difference across different companies, right? But for us, as an engineer, a backend engineer, you also take ownership of your infrastructure. So if your code is causing a CPU spike, you deal with it. Right? You either as a reactive thing, you could set auto scaling to introduce new instances, and those are all done through Terraform. So Terraform is a code representation of your cloud infrastructure, in short. So you can say, okay, minimum number of instances, maximum number of instances. When it's time to upgrade your database, if it's out of space, if it's the query is too high, and so on. So essentially, the backend engineer and the full stack engineers kind of own the infrastructure as well.
Yeah. Sam, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for asking. This is a good one. Also from Sam. What companies do you look up to for engineering culture or performance of their products? I guess.
Wow.
I guess you gotta other than Grab, because obviously
you as in me lah, right? As a personal opinion.
Yeah.
So at least for how I can speak for myself, to be honest, I haven't looked much into other engineering cultures, right? I haven't had the chance to. I mean, there are blogs I've read, on Netflix and how they have that chaos monkey. That's pretty cool, right? But at the same time, some part of it is just very hard to replicate. In short, right? Like there are certain limitations within the company itself that is not able to adapt to that other culture, but within Grab culture, I guess we have sufficient influx of different talents from different companies that they bring in what they have had previously. And I guess from that kind of boils down and I learn, and we collectively learn from that as well, right? So if someone comes in from Amazon, then they have a certain set of cultures and they would influence on their team where they are at. So sorry, I didn't answer the question, I know, but at least for engineering culture, I can't say. As for performance of products, we do, look at our competitors. I mean, that's a given, right? So I think at least for like Uber for Business, I mean, now they're not a competitor, right? They're not that, and we kind of learn from them, like what they have done right, and sometimes we refer, this flow, why did they do it this way? Is there something that applies to us as well? Because Uber for Business, Grab for Business, there is still that similar context, right? So we sometimes look at them and it's like, they have this way of presenting the information, way of allowing the users to interact flow, the UX. So those are, I would say, they are definitely, their quality is there, I would say.
Awesome.
Other companies,
Sam,
I guess,
Sam, does that answer your question?
I know we have we don't really have much time, but just a follow up on what you mentioned about like the evolving nature of Grab's engineering culture. Do you feel like it's more bottoms up or top down? Because you said like, for example, someone from Amazon, if they like introduce something, like how does that continue to get passed on, especially if there's like so many squads?
Right. So at least from the top, right, they have this, the GrabPay, as you can see. They've introduced all these new how to put it, cultural vision across Grab to kind of align everyone on the what the Grab way is, right? It is quite recent, and there were a few iterations of it, and I guess that's where they keep it together as from the top. And I think it is fairly broad enough for us to initiate change. So in terms of processes, each team kind of gets their own independence to effect change, right? So if you say, want to have a rotational on-call versus a dedicated one, or are you going to do certain things in a certain way, use Jira in a certain way, we have some flexibility on that front. But I think it boils down to like, there are still guidelines, right? Like we can't emergency deploy to all 10 instances at one go. That's something you cannot do. You shouldn't do.
Right.
Those guardrails are put in place to ensure there are best practices across the board.
Yeah.
But of course there are exceptions, and that's where that we can make some changes. So I would say it still differs team to team, and from bottom up, we do, the people that we have do influence the team's culture. Right. So at least from my team, it's a full stack team, right? Everyone's full stack. So it's a bit different from how we solve problems, view problems, as compared to a full backend team, right? So they would be thinking about things like latency to the milliseconds, but as a full stack team, is like more of we should be designing APIs in certain way across the board. It's more as a whole. So things are slightly different team to team. Yeah. But there is still, flexibility. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay. I think this next question is pretty top of mind for everyone. Any advice on how a fresh grad can prepare themselves for a Grab interview, portfolio-wise and algorithms?
Lead code. So I think as an industry, right, the whole algorithm things is not gonna go away anytime soon. So lead code is your best bet, right? Just practice and practice, because there's no two ways around it, right? But I think on the other side of things, right, portfolio, and I guess it's a lot more. I would say, at least what I am looking for are like like, do you have the passion sufficiently to look deeper into what you use, in a sense, like if you use Golang, do you know what it is used for, what kind of use cases, what are the benefits of using this language against another,
right?
And if you are a backend engineer, do you only look at your instance, your service, your APIs? Do you also look at the bigger picture, how that affects the users, how that affects your other teams in API interface, the dependencies, and of course, bottom line, problem solving, right? Like, are you able to first identify and scope out the problem you're trying to solve, and talk through the approaches, and of course the weighing of pros and cons across the different solutions. So it's a lot of solution. But I guess different companies differently, but across the board it's still algorithms. That one cannot help you. You still have to do lead code.
Right. So lead code and understanding lead code, understanding trade-offs, being able to explain those trade-offs and the logical thinking. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Porter, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that totally does.
Okay.
That totally does.
How about, I think this is one question that we haven't really covered in this general domain yet. Is there mentorship at Grab? Right? Like what is let's say like I'm a new engineer joining Grab today. Like what kind of support is there for me? Like is it completely free for all, or like I know there's a track, so that's good. I can see
Yeah.
how I can progress at Grab. Yeah.
Not that I know of as a very, it's a process wise, right? We have, when a new joiner comes in, we have a Grab buddy that kind of takes care of that person in a sense, to ramp up, know the people. But after that, it's a lot team culture into shaping how you learn, really, right? I think there is not going to be someone that's going to tell you, hey, you need to do this. So there's a bit more responsibility on the new engineer to chart out the course, like talk to the manager to chart out your career path, right? And I guess that is the point of contact. As for team culture, it's really their interaction with the team. It's more natural rather than there's someone that mentors. I know there's some mentorship programs, but it's not like prescribed to new engineers. It's more of like it's been a while in company, there's someone from another team you want to seek mentorship with. So those are there, but it's not really on every engineer level.
Jian, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
For a minute? Okay, awesome. Okay, I think we have time. We're just about out of time, so I'm gonna wrap up a little bit here. Aik Siang, usually we leave our guest speakers out with one last question, which is, would you have any general advice for everyone here where we are entering the industry for the first time, becoming an engineer for the first time? What should we look out for?
Learning experiences, I would say. When you look at companies, try to look for the learning experiences, and I guess there are benefits both ways in big companies where you learn all the processes and what are the best practices, but I would more recommend in more of a startup, smaller company where you do a lot more, right? You learn, of course, the hard way, right? Through the mistakes that we do, and then they make sense of the processes that are put in place. Like, why don't you do this? It's because if you do this, this will break, and then it will wake you up. It's like, why don't you deploy on Fridays? Because you don't want to get paged on Saturdays and Sundays, right? And sometimes you have to learn it the hard way. So I would say, prioritize the experiences on top of salary. If you can.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Aik Siang. That was super helpful. Thanks for being with us today. That was really great.
Thank you. Carl, been nice.